Russia's going to win this war. This is a crazy U.S. gambit. We knew it, but we thought we could get away with it because Russia was weak. Well, they played the poker hand, they bluffed, they raised the stakes, they lost.
Jeffrey Sachs just dropped a bombshell, and it's not pretty. He's warning that America is on a collision course to be crushed by Russia. In his words, the U.S. is bleeding credibility, wasting billions, and walking straight into a trap it built for itself. This isn't politics as usual. It's a warning that even rattles Washington's power players.
I know that the American officials thought that they had the winning hand. I never think much of American strategists, by the way. They're failures. They're not very clever.
Jeffrey Sachs isn't mincing words. He's basically saying the thing nobody in Washington wants to admit. The United States is losing its grip, and Russia, of all players, is the one holding the stronger hand. That's the bombshell. And what's wild is how casually this truth is being ignored. Every time America's president opens his mouth about Ukraine, it's like he's tossing around words without a map.
First of all, it's very hard always to understand what he means by any phrase, by land swaps or anything else. Everything is imprecise, varying by the hour and days.
He's talking about land swaps, hinting at giving back land for Ukraine like it's a real estate deal gone sideways. But Sachs is clear. The president doesn't speak literally. His words shift by the hour, and when you peel back the layers, it shows one brutal thing. There's no real plan. America's political chaos is spilling over into foreign policy, and it's not just about Ukraine anymore. This is about the end of a decades-long dominance that's slipping through Washington's fingers.
Russia would get, quote-unquote, all of two oblasts, Donetsk and Lugansk, the Donbas oblasts, and it would, quote, swap area that it has claimed in Zaporizhia and Kherson that it doesn't control right now. So that would be called a swap.
Let's dig into his so-called plan. He's been floating this idea that maybe Russia could keep Donetsk and Lugansk while giving up pieces of Zaporizhia and Kherson that it doesn't fully control. On paper, it sounds like a trade. In reality, it's a fantasy. Those regions are war zones, heavily contested, and the idea of Moscow casually handing back territory is laughable. Sachs points this out because it's not just the details that are wrong, it's the mindset. He talks like a deal maker but refuses to spell out what that deal really is. Is it incompetence? Fear of the hawks in his own party? Or is it something darker? A president too politically cornered to challenge the very machine he once promised to break? Sachs throws the question back at us. If America's own leaders can't define the endgame, who's really running the show?
Russia is winning on the battlefield, that Ukraine does not have the personnel.
Meanwhile, the battlefield tells a story that few in the West want to hear. Sachs is blunt. Russia is winning. Not with flashy headlines or sudden breakthroughs, but with something far more brutal: time.
Russia's going to win this war. That, I think, was obvious from the start.
Ukraine's forces are exhausted. The numbers are grim. They don't have the personnel to match Russia, and they're running low on munitions while Moscow keeps grinding forward. This war has become one of attrition, and in that kind of fight, the side with more people, more weapons, and more patience usually wins. Sachs says that's Russia. Every week this drags on, Ukraine is bleeding manpower and morale, and Western support is wobbling. That's not just a battlefield issue, it's a political time bomb.
A significant majority of the Ukrainian people want the war to end with negotiations. Zelensky is a military dictator in essence right now, mostly as a puppet of a variety of forces, the extreme nationalist right of Ukraine on the one part, the United States for a long time.
So where does that leave President Zelensky? Sachs doesn't hold back here either. He says Zelensky's refusal to even consider negotiations isn't just stubbornness, it's dangerous. Sachs argues Ukraine already had its chance years ago with the Minsk II agreements, a framework that could have given autonomy to Donetsk and Lugansk and avoided this catastrophe. But Kyiv and Washington turned it down. They gambled, and now they're paying the price. This is where Sachs's warning really cuts deep. When leaders refuse to admit reality, wars don't just drag on. They devour everything. The US keeps issuing ultimatums to Moscow, as if sanctions and speeches could move an opponent holding 6,000 nuclear warheads. Europe keeps thumping its chest while watching its energy prices spike.
But he's putting his countrymen in an even far worse situation. This war should stop. There should be a settlement on the basis of neutrality, an end of this absolutely reckless U.S. adventure.
And Zelensky keeps fighting a war that, in Sachs's words, was lost before it started because the West never understood Russia's red lines. What Sachs is saying here isn't just criticism, it's a wake-up call. The old playbook of American power, the one built on endless resources and political swagger, is running out of pages. And if Washington doesn't find a new way to handle this, it's not just Ukraine that loses, it's the credibility of the entire US-led order.
The United States and the Ukrainian post-2014 regime gambled, and they lost. They had many chances to avoid losing the Donbass. It was called the Minsk II agreements. But the United States and Ukraine said, no, we're not going to honor the Minsk II agreements. We're not going to give autonomy to the eastern regions of Ukraine, that is Lugansk and Donetsk. They gambled.
Now, let's talk about the guy at the center of it all, Volodymyr Zelensky. Sachs argues it's even more complicated. Zelensky isn't really running the show alone. He's being propped up by Western backers who want this war to continue and by hardline nationalist factions inside Ukraine who see compromise as betrayal. Sachs's implication is clear. Zelensky might be smiling on magazine covers, but behind the scenes, he's cornered.
Well, Zelensky has no choice. If that's true, he should not have stayed in the job. For whatever reason, he's doing great damage to Ukraine and to the people of Ukraine. They're getting killed in huge numbers. They are losing on the battlefield.
The harshest part? Sachs doesn't think Ukraine can win this war, period. He says Zelensky is sacrificing thousands of young Ukrainians in a battle that was doomed from the start, simply because the West gambled and lost. And here's where Sachs really pokes the sore spot. He hints that corruption hasn't gone anywhere. While soldiers are dying in the trenches, Ukraine's elite still seem to be living comfortably. Billions in aid keep flowing, and Sachs questions whether too much of it is disappearing into the wrong pockets. It's a brutal contrast. Ordinary Ukrainians bearing the cost while the political class keeps making speeches and asking for more.
Second, he's afraid that he's politically cowardly. Or third, quite possibly, and it's part of the incompetence, perhaps he doesn't understand what real politics is.
But Sachs doesn't stop at Ukraine. He pulls the camera back and points right at Washington. His argument? This war didn't start with Biden or even with Obama. It's the endgame of a decades-long failure. Sachs says the US has been playing a reckless game since the 1990s, pushing NATO eastward despite promising leaders like Gorbachev and Yeltsin that it wouldn't. Every administration, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden, and now President, kept doubling down, convinced Russia would just accept it. Spoiler alert, they didn't.
They played the poker hand, they bluffed, they raised the stakes, they lost. So now we're ending this particular game.
Now, here's where Sachs gets really unsettling. He suggests something that makes even seasoned listeners sit up. He talks about presidents who actually tried to break this pattern, the rare ones who looked for peace, and how they didn't always survive politically, or even physically. Sachs points to John F. Kennedy's efforts during the Cuban Missile Crisis and his push for arms control.
Kennedy was not incompetent. Kennedy was gifted and became even more gifted in the final year.
Kennedy faced down his own generals and hardliners and tried to shift toward diplomacy. Weeks after pushing for a more peaceful approach, he was gone. Sachs doesn't say it casually. He implies that when presidents challenge the deeper power structures, the so-called deep state, it doesn't end well for them. That's a chilling statement.
It's no miracle. Nothing is sure in this world, but this is the best bet.
And this brings us to Sachs's biggest punchline about America itself. He argues the United States isn't really what it claims to be. Not a shining democracy, but a country run by its military-industrial complex, a system where elections happen, but the machine runs the show. It's not a new idea, but Sachs makes it sting by reminding us Eisenhower warned about this back in 1961. Eisenhower, a five-star general himself, told Americans to beware of this system, and Sachs says that's exactly what we're seeing now. The machine is alive and well, and it's steering foreign policy no matter who's president.
Maybe he's just afraid. Maybe that's why it's so hard to make peace, because we are not really a democracy in the United States. We're not really a republic. We're really a military state. The military-industrial complex runs our country.
And here's the kicker. Even strong presidents can't just end wars. Why? Because the second they try, they're branded weak. Sachs doesn't hold back here either. He straight up calls Graham ignorant, even the stupidest senator in the whole Senate. It's harsh, but it makes the point. Hawkish voices still dominate, and they make sure any attempt at compromise is political suicide. So what's left? According to Sachs, a country trapped in its own cycle, leaders afraid to make peace, policies built on old bets that keep failing, and a system more interested in keeping the machine running than in saving lives. And all of that? It feeds right back into this war, this crisis, this moment where Ukraine is burning and America is losing the narrative. Sachs's message is clear. This isn't just about one battlefield. It's about the kind of country the US has become. Like this video and hit the subscribe button to get more UGent news.